Hello, divine creations, divine marvels, children of God. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, Bruno's teachings have been extra on my mind as of late. I try to keep them on my mind all throughout the day, fall short most days. But yesterday they were really on my mind. Oh, actually, 2 days ago. It was Martin Luther King Day here in the United States. And I'm assuming most people know who Martin Luther King was. He was here in the United States. He was an advocate for civil rights for African Americans and really to many of us here in America, a national hero, someone who with intense courage faced evil and really was able to bring about some beautiful and radical change because of his work. And tragically, he was killed for opposing evil. And he was, he's been a hero of mine for a long time. And part of the reason was he seemed to me to be someone who really was living the teachings of Christ. And this was long before I found out about knew of Bruno Gröning, and I admired Mahatma Gandhi for the same reason, of someone who really, in essence, put their own needs second and really set out to help and to serve the world and hopefully to change the world. And they both did, Gandhi and Martin Luther King. And part of why this reminded me so much of Bruno Gröning is Bruno spoke very highly of someone named Albert Schweitzer. I don't know exactly what Bruno said. One person I heard, I haven't read this, so I'm keeping just an ounce of skepticism because I like to read Bruno's teachings directly. But one person said that Bruno said of Albert Schweitzer that Albert Schweitzer was someone whom Bruno felt he could literally study with or learn from. That caught my attention. Someone who Bruno, and I don't know if that's true, and so I almost wish I hadn't said it. I don't like to pass along things I haven't verified. But regardless, that got me interested in Albert Schweitzer, and I did some research. And so Albert Schweitzer was a Christian, and his approach to Christianity was very interesting. He decided for the first half of his life, he would kind of do what he wanted to do, kind of have his own life. But for the second half of his life, that he was going to the best of his ability, surrender to God and try to be like Christ. When I read that, it really struck me. Now, Albert Schweitzer didn't walk around in sandals and a robe, and imitate Christ, and neither did Martin Luther King, and neither did Bruno Gröning. They didn't imitate Jesus, but they embodied the way of life, of trusting in God, of opposing evil, of speaking their conviction and trying to help people, and doing all of this to the best of their ability without fear. And so this idea of striving to be like Christ, it's really been on my mind the last couple of days, like I said, because of Martin Luther King Day and because Bruno called us to become masters of life. And I've often tried to fathom what that could mean. What could that mean? What could that mean for me, a very fallible human being who sees myself as so far less developed spiritually than Christ or Bruno, much less someone who lived a saintly life, like Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Albert Schweitzer, someone, these people were just dedicated and devoted to service in God. And so it can seem like the bridge between myself and these saints or even these great souls, it can seem so far and so unreachable. And yet what I've come to is this notion of progress, not perfection, and this notion of, well, do the next right thing. So, okay, Gandhi, Martin Luther, Albert Schweitzer, these were people who just gave their life to God and service. I'm not there yet. I aspire, but I'm really not there yet. But I can make a little progress every day. I can grow in that direction. Because it's very easy to have lofty ideals, but to actually do it. Bruno Gröning spoke about this. He said that human beings say yes often, but how often do they stand by that yes? Part of what I take that to mean is, it's one thing to say, I'm going to dedicate my entire life to God and service, but to really stand by that, it's easy to say it. It's a little harder to do it. And as Bruno often called people to self-reflection, it's very important to know ourselves, to know our limitations, and to know where we are on the path. And I would say to set reasonable goals, to move towards that. Because Bruno spoke about this path not as tuning in the morning and evening, though that's a great start, but truly a life of devotion, of seeking connection with God moment by moment, and of being in service. And so it's like, well, where do we begin? Well, starting in the morning, tuning in the morning and evening is a great start. Taking breaks throughout the day and asking God and asking Bruno for help to be more devoted. So I've shared over the last year how one line of Bruno Gröning's really, that I was not aware of, that when I read it, it just changed kind of everything for me about Bruno's teachings. And that was that, I'm going to have to paraphrase, I don't have the exact line in front of me, but to follow God, to do the will of God, one has to be detached from earthly things. Because I had been aware of this idea of following God, even before I met Bruno, and being guided by God, but it's how to do it. And I've been trying to do it and had some success in being guided, but was feeling really frustrated with it. And then I found that one line of Bruno's, and it just kind of answered all my questions of, I struggle to follow God because I'm attached to worldly things. And it took a good solid year for that to sink in. Bruno didn't speak in complex words, but he did speak in deep words. And so now I'm in the process of cultivating healthy detachment. And to anyone out there watching this, I would say it's a very delicate process and not something to hop into, to just be like, I'm going to detach from everything. It doesn't work that way. But so these people like Martin Luther King or Albert Schweitzer or Gandhi, who lived saintly lives, they had to lessen their attachments. That doesn't mean they had to turn their back completely on the world, and they didn't, or you could say worldly responsibilities or things, but they did have to put God and service first. That's not an easy thing to do. I would know I've tried, and I still continue to try. And ultimately, I believe that's the goal. Because Bruno spoke, when he spoke about uh, the spiritual journey, the German word he used, and I don't have the German word handy, please forgive me, but it translates as it gets translated as duty. We all have a duty to connect to God, to follow God. But the German word actually is more like a vocation, a calling, uh, a word that you would use in the military, that something that in essence you kind of have to do. I don't like to use the word have to, but a soldier has to follow the commands of their captain or their leader. They have, in essence, an obligation. They've made an oath. A doctor has an oath to do no harm. It's beyond duty. And I'm struggling because I don't think we have a good word for it in English. And uh, and I wish I could remember the German word. I'm so sorry. I cannot. Um, but there's a very precise German word that speaks to this deep need and obligation and duty. It's like this very complex yet beautiful word. And that's the way Bruno described the spiritual path. That we have this intense calling, need, vocation, duty, obligation to connect to God and to follow God. Now, again, and to boot, Bruno would say that we need God. So not only is it something that we have this intense calling for, but it's actually something that we need. And this became very clear to me today. I went to a church service this morning, and when I go to church, and I go to different churches and denominations, even different religions. This was a Christian church. What I do is I listen, but I tune in the whole time I go. And it generally is a very sacred and special experience. And so I went this morning, and as usual, I tuned in the whole time. And by the end of it, I felt such a deep peace, such a deep stillness. I just thought, oh, and it wasn't like a euphoria. It wasn't a kind of this excited bliss, but just this deep serenity. And I just thought, oh, this is so precious. Oh, if I could feel this way always, what wouldn't I trade to feel this always? And Bruno spoke about this. He spoke about the divine heavenly peace. And Bruno said that he had been successful in not giving up that heavenly peace for anything. Now, from my view, for anybody to do that is quite the achievement. However, I would say it's even more so for someone like Bruno Gröning, who had such a challenging life. And Bruno said to be connected, joined with God, that is everything. And I think I had a little bit of an understanding of what he meant by everything this morning. There was such a deep state of, we could say communion, that I just felt whole. I just felt home. And I know that from my own reflection, I know that I'm looking for that and I want that. In some ways, I think that's what I want more than anything else. And this kind of connects the dots. That Bruno said we had this deep need for God. As he said, God has everything we need. That we have this duty, and I use that word with quotes because that's not the exact word Bruno used, to be connected to God and follow God. And then to be connected to God, that is everything. And this final idea of letting go of attachments. And Bruno spoke about how through the process of letting go of attachments, that's in essence what spiritual liberation is. The letting go of attachments and the holding on to the divine heavenly peace. You could say letting go of the attachment to worldly things and holding on to or becoming attached or bonded to God. And so we have these great examples, such as Bruno Gröning, such as Christ. And then we have these extraordinary examples, such as Martin Luther King or Gandhi or Albert Schweitzer. To give us, not just to give us something to strive for towards, but in some ways to show us, to remind us of the path that we're on. Nat wrote, "It's for life." Amazing, Nat. You're probably know more about her than I, and your reflections on that. Hi from Hamburg. Hello, Mirth66. Just saw you streaming. Blessing. Thank you for saying hello. So those are a few of my thoughts today on the path. And I wish everyone a beautiful day of seeking connection to God, seeking to be guided by God, and finding that sweet heavenly peace that feels like home. Blessings to you. Thank you, Nat. Take care.